So this particular topic actually hits home for me because my wife, you see behind me, kids, she's an educator. She teaches calculus here in Las Vegas, Nevada. She's a teacher, teaches high school kids. And every day that I send my kids to school, my two young daughters behind me, I'm sending them to school to learn. I am trusting the school system to give them a safe space to be educated, trusting the school system to protect them. That is what we do as parents. And this particularly should actually hit home to all parents and soon to be parents. It is no longer a problem, guys. It's become an epidemic of sorts in Nigeria where people feel emboldened and bold enough to leave their homes and put their rotten fingers on our sons and daughters. It's bordering an epidemic. Is that what we are reduced to now as a nation that can't even protect our school system? It appears so, because this has been ongoing for far too long. And it's every parent's nightmare to send your child off to a boarding school to be educated, only to get that phone call that they are missing. It's bordering a catastrophe. And it's something that what needs to be done? Who do we need to get involved to remove this cancer that's eating at our community? Farmers are afraid to farm their lands. Parents are afraid to go to work. Teachers are afraid to go to school and educate students. And students are afraid to even go to school and learn. That is what Nigeria, the giant of Africa, is reduced to. Child safety, which should be the number one on the list of any civilized world or any civilized community, has, in my opinion, been put on the back burner. More attention is focused on building flyovers and roads, but no one is really focused on the security of schools, especially boarding schools in Nigeria. So I'm going to tell you my boarding school story. My father was abroad, sent me back to Nigeria to attend boarding school for 2 years. And I'm going to tell you the problem. And in my own personal opinion, from my own personal experiences, having attended boarding school in Nigeria as a child, I honestly think that some of these boarding schools should be shut down immediately. Not all, some. Because there's a lot of gaps and a lot of security issues facing the boarding school system in Nigeria. What is really the benefit? And I'm talking to parents directly. What sort of benefit do you see in sending your child to go and learn in an unsupervised environment. I can never send my girls to a boarding school. I can never put their safety at risk like my father put my safety at risk. Yes, he went to boarding school. I actually went to the same boarding school that he went to in the 60s and mid 60s, 70s. It was an experience that I would not wish on anybody. And if you are a parent right now, you are considering sending your child to a boarding school in Nigeria, don't do it. It's the so-called seniors, right, that are supervising these young kids. I was one of those seniors. Essentially, you have kids supervising kids in an environment like that. It's also a danger to the young girls. I'm not talking about the militants right now. Let's talk about internally in the boarding school system, internally. Some of these instructors and teachers may be having relations with students. They may be having relations with minors. I know for a fact that this happened because in the boarding school that I went to, you had old men, teachers, engaged in relations. Yes, me, I went to an all boys at that time. Now that school is now co-op. It's now boys and girls. But mine was all boys. So there were teachers having relations with young female students in other schools close to other boarding schools close to mine. So it was like we had our own boys school, and then just maybe a couple of miles on the other side of town, there were girls' schools. So these things are happening. I'm just talking about internally. We're going to dive into the external risks involved. What did I really learn in boarding school? To be honest with you, when I look back now, other than the friends that I made, I can seriously tell you that I did not learn really anything substantial throughout my experience in the boarding school system in Nigeria, and I was only there for 2 years. Some of you are putting your children from as young as 7. Jeanette, my daughter, is 7 years old. She's in first grade here in the United States. Some of you are even putting them at such a young age. There are people right now from the tender age of primary 1 or 2, or in Jeanette's case, she's in the first grade. From that level of education up till maybe even SS3, their entire experience is in the boarding school system. Exposed to predators. This also applies to boys too. Exposed to danger, exposed to a toxic environment. That is what is happening right now in the boarding school system. Now, as far as these militant groups, it has now become a full-blown business operation for them because the school system is relatively an easy target for them. In my time, I didn't recall seeing any security on site. You see, a gatesman that just sits there, opening the gate for cars, closing the gate for cars, that is not security. That is a hired gatesman that maybe is making 10,000 naira a month, if that. Tops 20,000 naira a month. That is the security system you are entrusting, or you may be entrusting your children to. And not just parents, also the local government elected officials in charge of these schools. Essentially, it's a petri dish for crime. It's an easy target for criminals. Because you can't really, so I'm former military, I'm ex-military. Do you know how long it takes to plan and coordinate a convoy attack like that? These guys probably surveyed the school, did a test run, knowing that there is no single barrier to them and access to the school. There's really not. That is why these pickups and snatches and abductions continue to happen. Because the school compound is not protected. The school compound is not guarded. These students are waking up every day. Speaking directly now to the parents, what would motivate you to want to put your child? See, people are looking at it more from the militant perspective. You see, to them, it's a petri dish. They just go snatch, do whatever they want. But who allowed that to happen? It's the parents that put their children in an environment like that, exposing them to danger, exposing them to insecurity. On what grounds? To go and learn what? Camaraderie. To go and learn what? Social skills. Your children belong at home with you. When you send them off to school, you send them off like we do here. Obviously, I cannot compare the American, but I don't know anything about the American public school system. I'm sorry, the boarding school system. I went to a public. I know the public school system, maybe the private school system in the US. But the boarding school system is something that I'm not familiar with, so I can't really speak on that. But I can speak on my experience only, having attended boarding school in Nigeria. It may have been safer in the 60s. Maybe that is the reason why my dad thought it was a good idea to send me. And when I was in boarding school in the 90s, were there abductions happening? Maybe. But the difference between then and now is then we didn't have social media. There wasn't really any platform where people can go and report things that they see. Unlike social media now, where something happens within a few minutes, it's global news. That is why I'm advocating for most of these public schools. Many of them, I will probably say, honestly, 90% of them should be shut down for good. and puts the responsibility. You see, a kid doesn't need to go to boarding school to learn anything. It's not as if parents are there helping with homework. They are not. In some cases, they'll put them in for a semester and they don't see the parent again until maybe visitation. How often do they visit? Listen, in my time, I didn't recall too many. There was no such thing as parent visitation day at the boarding school that I went to. If anything, it was the kid self that will go home. The parent rarely showed up. The entire time that I was there, my dad didn't visit me once. You are leaving your kids in an unsupervised environment to be coached, to be taught, to be educated by people you don't know. We need the criminality is wrong, but we also need to start pointing the lens at the parents. It's time for you to pull your kids out of the boarding school system and keep them in an environment where they leave the house and go to school, obtain their education, and return home under the watchful eyes and under the supervision of the parents.